Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn. Today I have with me Ed Howie. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
You're a business owner, a speaker, an author, and one phrase that always gets my attention is you use the word you're a joy beast.
I am a joy beast.
Well, before we get into where we were going to go, I forgot about that. Where did the joy beast come from? Is that something you...
It was actually other sourced versus it was crowdsourced, actually. So about 10 years ago, at the age of 47, I decided to become a certified indoor cycling instructor, like a spin instructor.
Okay.
Probably taught about 1,800 classes now. And my class is a combination of pretty aggressive athletics, but also a focus on mind and spirit and breathing. So it's like a combination of yoga and cardio together.
Okay.
And so after a very aggressive class, one of the riders said, "Man, you're a beast." And he goes, "No." Another person goes, "Nope, he's a joy beast." And it just kind of stuck. And what's cool about it is I probably wouldn't self-describe that, but I've been called other things, and I kind of like that one. And to have people say, "Yep, you are," that's pretty cool too. So I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, there's worse labels, like you said, right?
Yeah. I think that the cool thing about it is that joy specifically has been a lifelong journey for me.
Mm.
And for too long, I believed that joy was bliss.
Mm.
And what joy really is peace of mind. And so once I discovered that, I realized that we can do a lot more to ensure joy in our lives than we do. But we have to do it intentionally.
Mm.
I also believe it's spirit-led.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier to do it with Jesus in your heart. But I think joy also exists for non-believers. There's just so many depths of joy. And I think what the world really lacking is peace of mind. And so if I can help create a little more peace of mind, then I'm good with that.
Yeah. No, that's a good personal mission. So you've been in leadership for a while, a long time, your whole career, I guess, or most of it. And that was one of the reasons I invited you on the show. Currently own a business, but you were saying just before we started the episode that you recently launched a new one.
We did, yes. So my primary business, kind of cornerstone business, is a company called BTY Creative. BTY stands for Boldest, Truest You. And we are a strategic marketing and branding firm. As opposed to an ad agency, we really start with storytelling and then believe that your marketing and branding comes to life through every element of your business. It's not just advertising. It's not just your logo. So we help our clients really optimize their brand story and the brand experience to hopefully serve more and more customers. And through that process, before I started my company 20 years ago, I actually had 17 years with Chick-fil-A and 3 years with HEB, which is, as you know, a very large family-owned grocery store company here in San Antonio. Really regarded. Between Chick-fil-A and HEB, I had the experience to work with two of the most powerful brand enterprises, as well as, thankfully, two of the most well-regarded organizations on culture, on quality of product, quality of experience, that kind of thing. And I started working with Chick-fil-A when I was 15, and I learned early on that you can't outmarket a bad operation.
Mm.
And I've always believed that marketing and branding is a reflection of reality, not aspirational. And so to create a great brand, you have to have like a cool brand promise and a great logo, and your retail store, your office needs to be attractive, that kind of thing. But the function of what you do has to be done well, has to be done differently, it has to be done consistently. And so what I realized is that the companies that attract lifelong customers are the companies that serve their customers well, and they do it intentionally. And so we started studying companies that were successful, and we started studying companies that were basically known for disappointing their customers. We're like, it can't be that complicated. And so we created a framework called WOO, which stands for winning others over and over, and realize the way that you win others over and over is that you know what your customer wants, you have the ability to do it, and you do it over and over again consistently. And realize, well, hey, that's what we as humans want. And the only time you disappoint a customer, there's only 3 reasons why you disappoint a customer. You either didn't really know what they wanted or didn't have what they wanted. You couldn't do it or couldn't figure out how to do it. Or you knew what they wanted, you knew how to do it, but you couldn't do it consistently. And so the company is called Serve Others Well. And I've always hated the term customer service because it suggests that customer service is a department. I mean, you think about it. You walk in a retail store and there's a sign that says customer service. Well, what do I get in the other 95% of the square footage of the store? Is that not customer service?
Yeah.
So customer service is a function. Serving others is a mentality. It's an intentionality. And so me and several other really smart people have come together to create an organization that we want to inspire humans, organizations to more intentionally serve each other well.
Let's talk about the word serve, right? Because I mean, depending on what organization you're part of, like the word serve means something different to a military family
that's right.
Their loved one gave their life in service to the country. That may have a very different or deeper meaning than to I just served you a plate of fast food, right? Where does the word serve work for you?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned fast food because, food is my love language. But the act of serving someone is I have something and to get it to you, I have to put it into action. So whether you're serving in pickleball or you're serving in a homeless shelter or you're serving the person you committed your life to, it is that I have something that is of value to the other person. And the only way that transfers is that the person who has does something to get it to the person who needs.
So it's that conveyance of thought, of feeling, an emotion, an item. Like it could encompass anything.
It can be, it could be a text. I was thinking about you. It could be a huge donation to an organization, a university, a church, to enable lots of people to do something. But it's basically that I have something that can enable someone else to do something which I believe is typically additive. I'll take the positive deal is that by me doing this for you, you can either be like -er, feel better or do more. That's RE. But it's something that's additive to the situation. Now we can serve people poorly. If you've heard my keynote, I talk about hot fries and cold fries. Well, if I buy fries from you and you hand them to me and they're cold, you are serving me, but you're serving me cold fries and that's not good. So actually the act of service without context is kind of agnostic.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what I'm sitting here processing. And certainly in the definition that you've set up, I would agree. Because we do say there's bad customer service, right? There's bad service. So don't go there, you get bad service. Or go there, or ask for so-and-so, you'll get great service.
That's right. Yeah. Right. That's, you think that's great, but then you go, well, are we saying that there's only one person in an organization that can actually take care of customers? So,
yeah. And so we give levels of service a score or a rating.
Yeah.
Just kind of naturally.
Yep.
What's that mean in context to what you're talking about with this new business, Serve Others Well?
Yeah. So it's kind of, wow, interesting question. So we are developing what's called a WOO score for brands. And that is a measurement of basically the internal health and the functional external health of the enterprise. Okay. So the formula, the logic we're working on, and we're still optimizing all the numbers, but conceptually is you have like basically what your reputation is. But aside from reputation, you have like what the functional experience was. So like, for example, a net promoter
quality.
Yeah. So a net promoter score, really, the question is, would you refer this brand to another person? Okay. So that's like a referral rule. Well, that's not, so I might have a great experience, but it doesn't mean I'm going to refer you. Okay. So it could be a great experience, but like for me, it wasn't valuable. It wasn't bad, but I wasn't your target customer. So I'm not going to refer you to go to get a $150 steakhouse, again, like a steakhouse where steaks are $150. But just because I don't refer you doesn't mean it wasn't like good. It's just because sometimes there's just I'm not suggesting that every single human has the capacity or the calling to serve every single human. I don't believe every single business needs to try to serve every single customer. I don't think every customer is right. Because every customer is not right, because I can't effectively serve every single customer. If I only serve purple donuts and you hate purple, I'm not going to change the color of my signature purple donuts because you don't like purple. So yeah, I'm going to be okay with you not buying purple donuts because you don't like purple, right? So I think there's some things that we throw out as platitudes that don't make sense. But in this whole notion of service and this whole notion of rating it, is we believe that there's two factors when you look at, I'll call it the stewardship of enterprise, that are overlooked. Are one, what's the health of my team? And second, what is the impact of my organization or my enterprise or my initiative beyond the function of the transaction? Okay, meaning is if I go to a restaurant and I order the food and it's priced at a reasonable price and it's delivered as I want it and it fulfilled the functional purpose of nutrition and there was nothing else about it, then it was a good transaction, but it necessarily wasn't impactful. Versus a restaurant where, based on the fact that the food and family memories, that all of a sudden you have all these memories from going to that restaurant because it's where we celebrated our third child's birth, and it's where we had a birthday party, or it's where, you know what I mean? And so the context of our service can be functional or it can be impactful. I believe we as humans are called to be impactful, to do good, to do well.
So as you were sharing, I was thinking about the simple cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
You can serve a cup of coffee, and I've served you a cup of coffee, but I could build so much around that functional transaction, right? So I've got a friend, he and his wife create a super warm, loving, welcoming, nice environment in their home. And they're fairly well off, but they're super humble people. And everybody comes in and goes, this coffee that you guys, it's amazing. It's the best coffee on the planet. And they just go on and on. It's better than Starbucks. It's better than anything I've had. And they'll be like, I got to know the secret. And he's like, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. And they're like, no, come on. You know, like, where are you ordering this? Are you shipping it straight in from Colombia or what? And he'll hold up the red Folgers Classic. Wow. It's not the coffee. It's everything he and his wife have created around that you assume.
This is in their home.
This is in their home. Yeah. That it must be this really rich, rare, expensive, premium coffee because it's not the coffee.
Nope.
It's the experience I'm having.
Well, it's not, and the experience is a byproduct of their intentionality. That is the one, I believe, that's actually I believe is one of the critical hinges of life, but it's definitely a critical hinge of businesses, as we're trying to like be the best and do all this, and we want to deliver on time, and we want to like manufacture and hold our inventory and all this stuff. It ultimately comes down to the intentionality of the individual in every single aspect of the business and the intention they choose to set every day. So they've chosen to create a coffee experience versus pour you a cup of coffee. And that was their intention.
Yeah, they intentionally make you feel so loved that you assume it's a premium coffee.
That's right.
Right.
Because it is from what you described, they have like thought out, they've kind of, what's funny is the first O is orchestrate. Mm-hmm. They've orchestrated what they believe could make this an impactful thing versus a functional thing. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, I mean, I hope we all have those friends who just show up in that way, what we think is naturally, but I think is intentional. Mm. I've got a business associate that I've known for years that we've established a closer friendship through just greater frequency through a business association. And I shared with that, like it's EO. I know I love C12 too, but I'm a member of EO as well. And I happen to be the president of the San Antonio chapter. Cool. And so we were celebrating a woman by the name of Ann Deacon 3 weeks ago. She's been a member of EO for 26 years here in San Antonio. She started her own staffing talent agency, Deacon Recruiting, back 28 years ago. Phenomenal human. Well, she's on the board of directors with me. And we hosted the board for a kind of kickoff in June at my house, July at my house. And not only did she bring a bottle of wine to dinner, which my wife appreciated, about 5 days later, we got a beautifully handwritten thank you note that talked about the graciousness of us opening our house, the warmth of the home, and then how incredible the beef tenderloin is, or whatever. Okay. So I thought, wow, that doesn't surprise me from her. She's just, that's how she shows up. Well, 2 months later, I had an event for the entire chapter. It was called Pancakes with the President. And we did a 7:30 event at my house, AM, where me and one of my board members, we cooked pancakes on the Blackstone. Had about 50 people there. It was fun, pleasant, kind of kicked off the year, talked about stuff, everything. She was one of 50. She was one of 50. Mm-hmm. Guess what happened 5 days later? A handwritten thank you note, beautiful stationery, how delightful it was. The specificity of it was, to host a 7:30, but then to cook pancakes, which were delicious. I mean, it was not like, hey, thanks for our dinner. Like the thank you notes I would write as a kid, like, thank you for the train. I really liked it. You know what I mean? So I asked her about it. I said, is that a habit? She said, it is habit, but I have to make myself do it. Mm-hmm. They're not going to write themselves if I don't have stationery, and so you see where I'm going with this is that
set yourself up.
That it's kind of like, I try to stay healthy, but my goal is never to have like a 6-pack. Cause I don't want to say it's not possible, but it's definitely, I'm not going to give up the fries. But anyway, all that is to say though, is I used to think people my age that were fit were just always that way, or like had 6-pack. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at their behavior, they actually are doing the work to get it. It's not just genetics. Now, I know there's predisposition, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's a very long, winding answer going back to this whole principle of intentionality. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is you're accountable for your intentionality and your behavior, and I'm accountable for my intentionality and my behavior. When we're business leaders, we're accountable for 3, 4, 10, 100, 1,000, thousands of individuals' intentionality and their behavior, because their intentionality and their behavior every day is going to determine what the enterprise organization, the organism creates that day. And if you don't have a process in place to make it more intentional and aligned with your brand values, then you're just saying, hey, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't.
How do you bring up a good point. How do you convert service from this idea? One, everybody has, lots of different definitions of service in their mind. But how do you translate that from, okay, there's this concept, I want my people to be intentional, I want to treat my customers well, et cetera, into something that's actually duplicatable?
Yeah, great question. One, I think, so if I am CEO of a bank, and I'm sure it's all automated and AI and that kind of stuff, but back, like when they would enter checks. Remember you would deposit a check, they had to be in about 3:00, and they wouldn't post because they had to collect all the checks from the branches and send them to a processing place in each city, right? And they were like manually entering the checks or checking or whatever they were doing. Okay, so a data entry person at a bank hand keying checks 20 years ago, were they in customer service or not? Functionally, they would be considered not, because they weren't what? Customer facing. However, their ability to enter the checks properly and hit them to the right account and be accurate, and that is customer service. So I believe that any process or lack thereof will create the customer service impact of every function of the organization. And I can't really think of any organization to where, I'll tell you what the president of Chick-fil-A used to tell us. If you're not selling chicken, this is to the corporate staff. If you're not selling chicken, which no one at the corporate office was directly selling chicken, as he'd say, there's no cash register, then you better be supporting someone who is. Because, Chick-fil-A is about selling chicken. Every organization is about selling chicken, whatever the chicken is. And so I would say that every function is customer service. So how do you do it? Well, our model is you have to define what the standard is. You have to equip and train them to be able to do it. And you have to ensure it's done over and over again. So you mentioned before we started about the example about clean floors. When I was 17 at Chick-fil-A back in 1985, in North Carolina, as a high school team member, they rolled out Quality the Chick-fil-A Way. And in that, they had definition for like 54 different aspects of what then was called quality, service, cleanliness, which is kind of funny because to me, it was all service now. But quality was like the food stuff, service was the transaction, and cleanliness was the environment, the physical plant, if you will. And I still remember to this day, the definition of clean floors is they must be free of dust, dirt, oil buildup, and good repair. The whole logic would be if the floor had dust or dirt or oil buildup or not in good repair, it was not clean until it was free of dust, dirt, oil buildup, and good repair. Every business I know has a clean floor or not. Now, where it comes into is that, again, I think restaurants are an incredible microcosm for any business, B2B, B2C, is if I'm 17-year-old Ed, and part of my job is to keep the dining room clean. What is my intentionality? Am I cleaning the table that's dirty because that's my job? I'm told to do that. Am I doing it because it's on my checklist and I'm checking off my checklist? Am I doing it because I got yelled at because I didn't do it 20 minutes ago? Or am I doing it because I want the next customer to have a clean table? Have you ever been a customer in a restaurant that didn't want a clean table?
There's been one or two. I thought that might be one of their goals.
But as a customer, it's universal. Everyone comes. So if
want to walk into a clean space.
If Ed can be persuaded, inspired, informed that I'm doing it for the next customer, not because of the quality requirement or not because I was told to, then that puts the intentionality on I'm wanting to do what? I'm wanting to serve the next customer well. The way I'm doing it in that moment is I'm doing it through cleaning the table. The deal is that most people don't think that way. We think about what are the tasks I have to do. We think about what do I have to produce, and we forget the humanity in it. And, going back to our organization, one of the things we want to do is remind each of us about the humanity of all this, because life's complicated. We're trying to do more with less resources. We've got the fear of AI and all this other stuff happening and all this unknown and known and all this kind of stuff. And we get distracted and we forget get the humanity. But then Ann Deacon shows up and writes a really nice letter because she didn't forget about the humanity.
How do you, it may just be me, but it seems like the world's more selfish than it was some years ago, as a general rule.
Okay.
Let's assume that hypothesis is true.
Yeah.
If that's true, that we're trending to be more selfish, how do you get people to be more service-oriented since it's thinking about others?
Wow. Okay. So selfish is an interesting word because your implication with selfish was negative, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And what you were really saying was that people put themselves first over others
in every situation.
In every situation.
To be the negative.
To be negative. Okay. Yeah. So are there times when the best thing you can do is put yourself first?
Yeah.
That's right.
Go to sleep tonight.
That's right. I think the difference is not selfishness. It is basically shrapnel.
Mm-hmm.
So am I hurting someone else by putting myself first? Am I putting myself first at the disadvantage or the harm of someone?
Mm.
Or am I putting myself first in that moment for the ultimate good of someone else? Okay, so I mentioned I teach cycling class. Have you ever done a cycling class?
No, maybe once.
Need to get you to cycling class, man. It's awesome. So it's a 50-minute ride, all right? And so what we do is and as my wife says, you go into a room and you ride for nearly an hour and you go nowhere. Well, actually, we go places. And the place we try to go is, at least when I'm teaching, is one of the things I say is, this is your 50 minutes to be purely unadulteratedly selfish. You're clipped in on a bike in a room with the door closed, loud music, dark lights. You can't serve anyone else at that moment. Only person you can serve is yourself. And so the way you breathe, the way you exercise, the way you let go of all the anxiety of everything that's waiting for you outside the door, kind of like what we're kind of supposed to do when we go to church, when we're actually worshiping, when we're actually are allowing ourselves to be present in the moment.
Kind of the way we're supposed to be with our spouses on dates.
That's fully present, that kind of thing. But so I don't believe that I believe there's time when selfishness is the best thing you can do. The question is, are you aware, not distracted by the expense? Now, if me working out every morning at 5:30 puts the whole burden of getting the kids ready for school every morning at 5:30, and that's not an agreed upon contract, right? You know what I mean? Then I may be serving myself well, but it could be at the harm of my wife. We use that as a random example, right? Excuse me. So that being said, I believe that there are more self-centered people I don't have facts. My impression, let me say this more clearly. My impression is that there's a propensity for people to be self-centered, and that is ignorant of the effect of themselves on other people, or frankly, not giving a crap about the effect of themselves on other people. I believe that is antithetical to what we're called to do. I believe we are supposed to be aware and intentional with our impact on other people. I believe we're supposed to be a light. I believe we're supposed to serve others well. Excuse me. So I believe there are people that are more self-centered. I believe it seems to be more of a habit of people that are more other ignorant, if you will, unaware, lack of empathy. But then all of a sudden you're surprised by the person at the grocery store who says, go in front of me, you've only got 2 things. Or, the person who intentionally sees you coming, and so they pull out of the parking spot so you can get it because you were next in line, versus the person who's trying to cut in front. Those little things. So I don't know. Do you think people are more self-centered today?
I don't know that. I think it's a symptom. I think it's we're in a society where we feel rushed.
For sure.
Well, if I feel rushed, then I'm trying to get things done. If I'm trying to get things done, I don't have time to be kind to you, and
I don't take time.
Yeah, but this is the mental condition,
exactly,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the assumption.
Yeah,
is I just don't have time to slow down and hold the door for you, or to help you get that thing off the top shelf in the grocery store.
So,
and because I got to get my thing done,
that's right,
so I can get to the people I want to be with.
And I believe for multiple reasons, the last 10 years, there's definitely been a shift towards isolation. Some forced, I don't mean just COVID, but I mean literally, some just based on the fact that, I want to work from home, and there's so many benefits to that, but that also means that My office is literally a room by myself for 40 hours a week. Okay, that's not how most of us were socializing 30 years ago in the workplace. We were doing it in community. So I think there's definitely a lack of community. And I think one upside of that is when you're part of a rich community, you value it even more because it is not as naturally occurring as it was maybe 20 years ago.
You worked in Chick-fil-A. You were one of the youngest store operators ever, right?
Well, I officially worked for Chick-fil-A corporate.
Okay.
From 89 to 99. So I started with Chick-fil-A corporate when I was 22.
Okay.
What happened is the summer before my junior to senior year I went to school at Chapel Hill. Chick-fil-A is based in Atlanta. Some corporate folks had seen some stuff I had done. I was like assistant manager for Mike Lawson at South Square Mall in Durham, North Carolina. Gave me my first real job with a real paycheck. And so someone from corporate said, hey, maybe we could have Ed do a special project for us this summer between my junior and senior year in college. So at age 20, I guess I was 21. It was 88. I was age 21, and I had the opportunity to run a Chick-fil-A for 2.5 months.
Nice.
So not many 21-year-olds were running it. It was a temporary operator role. It was a transition between one operator and the other, and the new operator was in training. So yeah, I got to run my own restaurant at 21 years old.
So Chick-fil-A, among others, there's big Fortune 500 companies that do this well. But since you live the Chick-fil-A experience, I heard Hillary Clinton back in the late 80s, early 90s say in a video, she was talking about because of the latchkey generation, the kids that are going home and no parents are there after school, parents were becoming less and less involved in the kids' life, that it was the responsibility was going to fall to the corporations to train people in social graces and, certain behaviors, the right way to behave, things that their parents just weren't around to teach them. Do you think there's any truth to that then or now?
Well, I was a latchkey kid. I was the youngest of three. My next oldest sibling's my brother, and he was literally 3 years ahead of me. So by the time I started high school, he was out. That was one of the reasons why I got a job at 15. I mean, I literally went to the mall. It's kind of funny. I got hired at the first place that would hire me was like it wasn't a Gap, but it was like a jean store. I mean, I didn't even kind of really want to work there, but like I was 15, they'd hire me. Well, they offered me the job and called me the next day and said, we can't hire you. We're not allowed to hire 15-year-olds. I was like, no way. So I went up to Chick-fil-A to get lunch or a snack or fries probably. And I said, do y'all hire 15-year-olds? And the woman said, yes. So I put an application. That's really the only reason why I started working at Chick-fil-A was because they would hire me at 15. I was blessed with parents who, my mom, my grandmother had a hospitable nature about them. A little fun story. My grandmother started her own catering business in a small town, North Carolina, for my mom and dad's wedding, because she couldn't believe what those caterers from Charlotte were going to charge. And then she had her own catering business for 25 years till she was like 74 or so.
Wow.
And so I definitely was raised around hospitality. I guess hospitality is the right word, right? But what happened, I think, for me, working in high school at the time, one is we didn't have video games. We didn't have all the social media. We played outside more. We did sports, that kind of thing. But what I got to do is I got to deal with a lot of different humans. And I realized that, we were busy, especially during the holidays, and the better you did stuff before the customers got there, the easier it was when they were there. And the nicer you were to the customer, the faster you could serve them. And so I got the opportunity to deal with a lot of different humans, and both team, like employees, as well as customers. But then also my coworkers varied from, the high school kids working there to people whose career was working in fast food. and to have someone who was working every day there from 9 to 3. And I remember her trying to figure out how much money she had left over to go buy another Christmas present that week, because she was buying a Christmas present a week for her 3 kids, like all year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, the isolation part, I've seen in our own kids, it was very easy in the last 10 years, if you're between the age of 15 and 23, to kind of disappear from active presence in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think easier than when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that organizations can sometimes be the first, I know that organizations can sometimes be the first stage that people are put on where they really have to use muscles they never used before, like to deal with an upset customer.
Were you able to train those high school kids at Chick-fil-A they're kind of known for world-class service, right? It's a fast food restaurant. I heard secondhand, or maybe I read the article or something. One of the Kathy family was being interviewed, and somebody said something about how is it that a organization that sells chicken generates so many quality leaders? And he goes, well, that's because we're not about selling chicken. We're a leadership institute that sells chicken. And that, forget the exact wording, but that was the mindset.
Yeah, no, I mean, they Chick-fil-A. So when the corporate purpose is to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that's entrusted to us, and to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. So, there's a foundational thing is to have a positive influence on everyone. And as the function, kind of going back to the whole clean floors thing, that was a quality initiative that was rolled out because they had hit about 175 stores, I think it was, and realized that the more stores they had, the less control they had over quality. So there had to be an understanding of common expectation, and as well as everyone had to be equipped to deliver it. So I remember the customer service training. It was just basic stuff like maintain eye contact, smile, warmly greet the customer, listen carefully, repeat the order back, count the change back, make sure that they don't need anything else with their order. One funny real story is that's where I first learned about the principle of suggestive selling. And I still remember the video. We used to have fried apple pies, which were amazing, especially with cinnamon and ice cream on it. But anyway, there was a video on suggestive selling, and it was so funny because they explained that suggestive selling was not just trying to get more money from the customer. It was providing them greater satisfaction by completing the order, which that's true. But, an apple pie also was another 79 cents. And so it was definitely bringing more revenue. So it wasn't all altruistic and just completing the order. It was a sales tool. But we were taught hospitality. Depending on how old you are, Chick-fil-A used to be only in the malls. And the way Chick-fil-A grew was cutting up a piece of chicken, putting toothpicks in it, and handing out samples. We were trained that you don't ask a customer, would you like a sample? Because when you ask a customer a question, their inclination to respond to a stranger is no. So you make it a proactive statement instead of, ma'am, would you like a sample of Chick-fil-A? It's, ma'am, try a sample of our Chick-fil-A chicken. You're not giving them an opportunity you're not asking a question, you're making a statement. It's actually a gentle command, and they're more inclined to take the sample. So yeah, they taught the mechanics of customer service, of sales, that kind of thing. Like even the clean floors thing. I can't believe at 57 I still remember it, but I do. But I just thought it was just kind of like, honestly, I wanted people to have a clean floor. I didn't want to slip and fall. I didn't want to be, food safety. But I wasn't fully altruistic about wanting it to be clean for every customer.
Do you think that by teaching you that, though, do you think that opened the door for your heart to be more genuine and integrous about being hospitable to people?
Definitely. Because it was modeled by the leaders I got to work with. And I don't mean just the owner operator, but the leaders I modeled. And in high school, I was a team leader, and me and another one of I think two of my high school buddies were all team leaders, and we wanted to be the best. I mean, it was definitely modeled, and that's what I think is great about positive impacts on working, high school, college, positive impacts on team sports, that kind of thing, is that it creates a muscle memory you don't realize is being created, and especially if humanity is involved with it.
Do you remember, or do you see now as you're going into companies, do you see this this intentionality to try to change their behavior, let's see, how do I ask this? If you implement these standards like Chick-fil-A did, clean floor, at first that felt like a task to you, but at some point, do you feel like your heart tilted to where you're like, I do want the customer to have a good experience.
Yeah.
Right. But you wouldn't have been ready for that necessarily on day one. You're like, just tell me what you want. Like,
yeah, so that's a great question. And I'm going to answer it two ways, try to be brief. We were taught what clean floors were supposed to be. And, we understood that. And as a funny aside, my mom would say, well, then this was not a good response, but she said, you stay late mopping floors at Chick-fil-A every night before you close, but you haven't mopped the floor here in months. And I made the stupid comment of saying, well, they pay me to do it at Chick-fil-A, not the thing for the 16-year-old to say. But anyway,
something called room and board.
That was asinine on my part. But anyway, so we had the standard, and obviously it's a restaurant. I mean, you don't want to, who wants to work in a dirty restaurant? But anyway, but it was also modeled in behavior of those around me. So the way the store is laid out, the broom was in this corner, and the whole kitchen, we were a food court store, so it's hard to explain, but basically on the floor the customer could see if the broom's here, the customer could see the floor from here to here. So the guy who owned the store, the operator, Mike Lawson, every time he would come out front, if he'd gone to the bank or been in a meeting or just come in or was coming back out front, he would grab the broom, and one of the first things he would do was sweep the floor just to make sure is sweep, and then he would go about doing whatever he was coming out front to do. It was just one of the things he did. Well, I made it the goal of that if it was my shift, that he would grab the broom, he would get to the door, and all of a sudden he'd look at the floor and see it was already clean and put it down. So my goal was to have a floor that he didn't need to sweep. Again, because he modeled in his behavior that. I think that, I think today, for the younger population of workers that tend to be more isolated, there's a lot of remote work, there's a lot of screen work and less interaction, and there's a significant amount less of community and environmental learning. I think it's harder for leaders to model the behavior other than to demand it or command it in an email or a Slack post or that kind of thing. So I do think there is a deficit in organizations of just literally the personal modeling. And I think in developing leaders, it takes a different approach today than it did because we had proximity. We had constant proximity. We don't have that. I think that exists in business and in life right now.
You say anything that's working to offset that? How do you address that? I don't know if you've seen any success stories.
We get to work with multiple organizations, and those that have created community when it's not natural, meaning figuring out ways to gather together if possible. Now, some organizations are too big to be able to do that, but to do something in person. It's funny where you've worked with someone for a year and a half, and all you know is this like a square. But then also seeing cool things like sending Tiff's treats to all your team members, and you have a cookie party at 4:00 or cocktail party at 5:00 or whatever it may be. Where you're creating kind of shared experiences, even though they're not necessarily physically present. I think also the who was it? Tom Peters, In Search of Excellence, maybe in the 90s. There was a phrase, MBWA, managing by wandering around. If you've got a remote team, you better figure out a way to wander around and to be able to converse and connect, and not just in a formal, like, tell me 3 things that you're doing well and 3 things you need to work on, formal review process. I think it's tough. I mean, I think it's tough.
Yeah. I smiled a moment ago. You were talking about all you've ever known them as this 2-dimensional, in this little window. During COVID, I had messed up my shoulder and I ended up in physical therapy. And I only knew the people working on me behind the mask.
Yeah.
And so about the time I was toward the end of that cycle, the mask come off. Actually, the whole time I only knew him with the mask.
Yeah.
Well, then I bump into the primary care provider that I had been working on me in a different setting. And I knew it was their company was meeting in that space. Right. So I knew everybody in that room was part of that company. And I look and I didn't recognize her.
That's funny.
Because she didn't have a mask on.
Yeah.
All I had ever seen was her eyes.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it was a freakiest thing.
Yeah. I really feel for, kind of talking about the younger generation a lot, but I really feel for the high school and college kids, or high school kids just entering the workforce that did all that during that 4 to 5 years, because it was so abnormal. So abnormal. And again, so we talked a lot about intentionality. Intentionality, I believe, has to be fueled by context. And when you're isolated, you're at a deficit of context. And so, which means I think you're also at a deficit of kind of having like, I would call it forced or inspired empathy. Because when your empathy is being able to imagine yourself in the situation the other person's in, and the more isolated you are, the less likely empathy is going to happen organically, right? And so I think there's a cumulative effect, which again is why we need to lean into even greater intentionality of serving others well. Now, I don't think we close the loop on the word selfish. I want to come back to that real quick. So I've said in my cycle class that I invite you to be purely, unadulteratedly selfish. You can't take care of anyone else this time. I believe one of the reasons why people are having a harder time serving others well is because they're not being selfish enough. And that is taking care of yourself first. And I believe the only way that we can truly show up how God created us for others is to truly show up how God created us for ourselves. And I think both take into account.
You said something that got me thinking just then. Because people aren't taking that quiet time, that 50 minutes of cycle time closed in a room, just focused on what's flowing through them at that moment, because they're not taking their quiet time in the morning journaling or spending time in the Word, or if they're not a person of faith, that quiet time, just a
meditation,
thought,
reflection,
or meditation, or one of those things. I think society in a whole, that actually may be why we're more selfish, is because we're not taking that daily time. We've never lived in a society, looking over thousands of years, we've never lived in a society that was so busy.
The literally the rate of production, the pace of production, the cadence of life, I think is just getting faster and faster. I mean, it sounds really just ridiculous when you say it, but when I started in I started working corporate Chick-fil-A in 1989, and this was before voicemail. I mean, literally, if one of the operators who I was serving, I was either selling chicken or serving someone. Well, the operators were the ones who had the team selling chicken. I was serving those that were selling chicken, the operators. If they needed to talk to me and I didn't answer my phone, then they would leave a message with our secretary. And if I was out of the office, I would have to call in and get voice to voice with the secretary, who would give me my messages. And then I would have numbers to then call back and you call back, and it could take a day to get some things resolved, even if we're both working to make it happen as fast as possible, versus I send you an email or a text and really wonder why you didn't respond 2 minutes ago. I mean, you've had the text for 5 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just the whole, again, if you have context, if you think the pace of life today is the only pace, then you don't realize just how, to your point, how frenetic life is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that makes it even more difficult to be intentional for yourself and for others, because you don't feel like you don't have the pace. One of my, to be in spin instructor, you have to have these really just powerful statements. And what I found is that one of the reasons I love it is that I'm coaching myself as I am, really as much as I am the riders. And so one of the things that I kind of like distilled and kind of solidified as a kind of a truism, if you will, years ago, was that the world tells us that speed is power. And that's a lie, that true power exists when obstacle and effort collide. And that is that I think we can get so distracted and so absorbed with the apparent obstacle in life that we think, well, if I just throw speed at it, then I'll solve it.
Mm.
And sometimes that happens, but sometimes it just means you just hit the wall 20 times more than you would have. And so I think that in this whole intentionality is, okay, there are going to be obstacles in life and I have to have a response. There's going to be opportunities in life and I have to have a response. Is the more intentional I am, the more premeditated I am about my response by effectively measuring the true reality of the opportunity impact. Frankly, the better steward I can be, because I apply the right resources at the right time relative to the right opportunity, and thus hopefully create fruit, create byproduct, create, service. I mean, like literally there's a transfer of something that's meaningful so that obstacle is diminished or that opportunity is leveraged in a powerful way.
It's all good stuff out. Let's land the plane. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I sit here celebrating progress, not perfection. I love podcasts. I love hearing people talk, but I can also start going, oh, they said that, I don't do that, or they said that, I don't do that, or either say, well, they're full of it. Well, hopefully I'm not full of it. I don't intend to be. But I also, it's just like when I'm teaching cycle class, I'm coaching myself as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I think that, we talk about service. I think one of the greatest things we can do to serve ourselves well and others well is to lead with grace.
Oh.
And to lead with grace means is that there is an element, in some form or fashion that cannot be earned.
Mm.
It is just truly beyond requirement or beyond natural byproduct.
Mm-hmm.
There's an element there that's just is magical. It is oftentimes it has to be intentional for it to actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have to be intentionally graceful with people because I get impatient. I get anxious with myself. I need to be intentionally graceful with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that to land the plane would be that, I hope this conversation has been inspiring, but for anyone who doesn't know me, just this is a journey we're on. And I do know that the more intentional I've been, I believe the greater steward I've been. And it's only been through the grace of God and the grace of others, and frankly, the grace of myself and myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to have all three. So.
That's good. Ed, thank you so much.
Thank you,
It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.